Pablo, why are companies so interested in working with LEAP?
The interest of companies actually made LEAP start because they were the ones first interested in measuring the environmental impact of production of livestock products. They were so interested because first consumers were demanding an evaluation of the environmental performance of these products, so they were interested in selling it to them. I guess the differentiation between products among more, let's say, environmentally harmful and less environmentally harmful, it brings an opportunity of business, because if you don't differentiate, then people will pay a price that would be rather the same price as they would put for the not so environmentally sound products. But when you offer a higher quality, then people are willing to pay more. And this is where the interest of companies arises from. As if I understand right, they were the ones asking FAO to establish LEAP because they were composing their environmental standards and they realized that there were big differences among them. So they needed a standardization of them, which would also ultimately benefit the environmental policies of governments. And this is why governments joined in, and also in several aspects, the added value of products from smaller livestock keepers and the efficiency in their production. And this is, I guess, how the steering committee of LEAP was born, because of the interest of all these products. But definitely, the companies have a big interest in knowing how they are performing environmentally.
What do you say is the most important argument pro-livestock, science-based livestock?
It's difficult to answer to this, at least from me as a livestock expert, because there are two main important points. I wouldn't say there is a single one. There is a very important nutritional point, and there is a very important environmental point when dealing with extensive livestock systems. From the nutritional point of view, something that the wider public usually doesn't know is that there is one essential nutrient in animal products, be it meat or milk or eggs, that cannot be substituted by a vegan diet, which is vitamin B12. In fact, vegan people usually take supplements of it because they can otherwise get sick. And in Africa, there is a big problem that is not evaluated completely, but it's known that this problem is there, of people not getting enough animal food, so that they are malnourished, not undernourished, but malnourished, because they don't get enough animal products. So I think that's an argument to understand that the human species as such is needing to eat animals, even if we like it or not. And otherwise we have to take pills, which doesn't feel very natural. But also I come from a rangeland ecology background, and I am very aware that the role that livestock has in the ecosystems, especially extensive livestock, not so much mixed systems or intensive systems, but extensive livestock has a very key role in maintaining some key ecological processes. And this is why it has been shown that livestock is able to maintain biodiversity in a very wide array of ecosystems.
What would you say are counter-arguments against livestock?
Aware of these arguments, and I think one is the welfare argument. There are people that consider it morally reprobable and morally incorrect to kill animals to nourish ourselves because they don't think that we have the right to inflict suffering to animals. This is, I think this falls rather in the beliefs of people, so this is hard to contest, so to say. I think we are part of the ecosystem of Earth, and it shouldn't be seen as something so morally reprobable to do so, but it's just a thing of belief. However, where I think things get more tangible is on, for example, the environmental consequences of eating meat. There is a big movement against livestock because of the occupation of land that it provokes, and also because of for example, the carbon emissions and the environmental impacts that it creates. And I think it can be argued against that. Again, from my perspective as a rangeland ecologist, I know that there is livestock and livestock. And the more intensive ways of producing livestock have intrinsically environmental impacts. But there is another type of livestock production that actually has rather benefits to the environment if correctly practiced. So in that sense, people that do not want to have livestock for the environmental consequences should think that maybe about 80% of the world's land, which means all kinds of ecosystems, has livestock in it, which is part of the ecosystem. So those are ecosystems where crop production cannot be practiced. And if it would be practiced, it would be an environmental disaster, so to say. But because this type of livestock is integrated into the ecosystem, it is, environmentally speaking, producing meat and milk and eggs at no cost. So I think this is a very important argument. Also, regarding the carbon emissions, there is the same argument that livestock emits a lot of greenhouse gases, etc. But I think, and this is a scientific breakthrough that I personally am working on it and that should still come, we should regard all the carbon emissions in their ecosystems. So we cannot tell that extensive livestock is contributing to climate change if it is integrated in an ecosystem where if they are not there, other animals will produce the same carbon emissions. So it's again producing meat at no cost.
When you think of politicians obviously do what their electoral wants them to do. So they're not really susceptible really that much to scientific arguments. What can you do to be persuasive with them to get them into considering pro-livestock arguments?
You know, politicians have to make much more complex decisions than we usually think, and they have to balance, for example, the environmental needs or the environmental tendencies of their electorate or their countries with the needs of their countries, not only in terms of nutrition, but also in terms of employment. Usually it depends on the country, but in developing countries, the livestock producing population tends to be a wide sector of the population, and they cannot just simply leave them unemployed. And I don't think that politicians are not permeable to scientific arguments. The thing is that the decisions that they have to do tend to be complex. So I think regarding, in general, pro-livestock arguments, we should distinguish among them. Because, again, as the decision-making of the politicians, it is a complex thing. Not all the ways of producing livestock are the same, and I think we can influence them to produce better livestock.
There's an old saying, he who pays the piper. So there's a lot of different interests behind research around livestock, industry interests and so forth. So how influential are those different groups from your perspective? Because I think there's a lot of contradictory messages that come out of the livestock research overall.
That's a challenge that science faces. Yes, of course, the ideal of science is that any research is absolutely impartial and objective. But as a matter of fact, humans are doing the research. So they are not only influenceable by the one who pays, but even for their own beliefs, let's say. So that's a factor. However, I think that initiatives like LEAP, which bring together people from very different interests and very different constituencies, add a value in the sense that they put very different perspectives together and they try to come up with a consensus. And I think that influences positively the outcomes. Regarding the apparent contradiction in scientific conclusions, let's say, or in scientific evidences, I don't agree with that. I'm a scientist myself, and I don't agree with that. I think people confuse this with the inherent complexity of science. And I don't think people have enough scientific culture to really understand scientific results. For example, not very long ago, a couple of years ago, there was this study of the WHO saying that eating red meat could drive to cancer. But what people do not understand is that First of all, they were talking about a level of meat above which it seemed that cancer was more probable, but also that a significant result in science doesn't mean that it will affect a wide range of the population. So you may find significant differences, but maybe the difference will be of a cancer rate of 1.1 versus 1.2. And I think people lack scientific evidence, scientific culture. And I think this is an issue in our society because it's a rapidly changing society where obviously science has an enormous role, but people do not understand science very well. And this also promotes some types of political extremism and etc. that are very negative for our society. So as a scientist, I am convinced that we should do a much better work of making science popular and accessible to everyone.